Hello, this is Mike at Let's Grow Shopping again. In the last video I made, I explained how I turned our lawn into swales with the intention of creating a food forest. And what a great image a food forest conjures up. It's the epitome of growing shopping. In this video I'm going to explain some tools you can use to create the food forest and also what I'm doing to start the process off. At the end of the last video, the trees were planted and a cover crop of mustard was sprouting. Before I show you how it's getting on, I thought I would cover off two concepts that enable you to understand the creation of a food forest in an urban backyard setting: the forest layers and guild planting. We'll start with the forest layers. When you look at a natural forest, there are plants, fungi and other organisms filling every niche from below the floor right up to the top of the canopy. This is the idea we're attempting to replicate. It's a scalable concept, and this diagram describes trees and plants suitable for a suburban backyard scenario, but you can reduce the size of the canopy and choose different plants in different layers to fit on a balcony in pots, or increase the scale for acreage. Also, some plants fill multiple niches. Sweet potato, for example, is a root crop whose leaves form a great ground cover, and it will also climb vertically given a suitable structure to go up. You can also add water plants and fungi to the forest layer concept depending on your location. Plant guilds are the other useful tool. These slides describe the properties of plants you need to work into your forest. My suggestions are just scratching the surface. There are a lot of other options for each function. I find it useful to think of the forest layers being about the form of the plants, how they grow in space, and plant guilds are about the function of the plants, what their natural properties are in addition to their looks. Again, some plants perform multiple roles, so you can mix and match them to provide maximum form and function options. By concentrating on longer-lived perennial plants, or plants that readily seed themselves, you're reducing future maintenance. A lot of these plants are also easy to propagate, so they're ideal for low-cost coverage of a large area. If all this looks a bit overwhelming, plant one tree and select plants to form a guild for that one tree. When you're happy and the guild is maturing nicely, plant another tree nearby and another guild around it, and so on. By combining the elements of a plant guild and the layers of the forest, you are setting the scene for an explosion of life. Looking at the swales in my garden, the fruit trees are the canopy, but they're very young, so the canopy is not very high. The mustard seed I planted had a couple of functions. It grew quickly and covered the soil, and it's a form of green manure. However, my wife wanted the seed to make mustard, so we didn't chop it when we were supposed to, when it was just flowering, and we let it grow. It got quite hard to make out the trees at one point, and the garden was alive with bees and other insects. As well as mustard, I also sowed clover, which is really untidy and always seems to grow over the path. However, it provides a lot of biomass to chop up and leave on the ground as mulch. Cherry tomatoes were self-seeding from the compost I put on as well, which gave a helping hand. At one point I felt as though I was in a race against time to propagate salvias, nasturtiums, strawberries, yarrow, lavender, so that there was something to cover the soil after the mustard had gone to seed. These clips show the miniature jungle being created. In addition to this, I planted pumpkin and melon seeds to try and provide ongoing ground cover. I couldn't really tell where I had planted things and where I hadn't, and a lot of the seedlings and cuttings didn't make it after being planted. As the mustard seeds started to die off, you could start to make out the gaps, so I sowed summer green manure consisting of sunflower, mung bean and millet seed. We've had one rainy week and then 40-degree days the next week, and this has played havoc with everything but the trees. Luckily the trees have powered through the blistering heat, however most of the herbaceous and ground covering plants have taken a battering. If you're going to have a go at this, it's important not to lose sight of the final goal. Don't get hung up on how everything looks. Just try and stick to the forest layers in the guild system, create biomass that can become mulch, plant soil enrichers and pollinator attractors, and add your own homemade compost. Remember that feeding the soil is priority number one. You can always trim up and remove what doesn't work later. It wasn't until I saw our first ever snake on this property, a red-bellied black, that I realised, okay, I should probably start trimming it back now. I took all the mustard seeds out for saving and pulled most of the weeds and fed them the chickens, and chopped up the mustard stalks and everything I didn't need and left it in place, and this is called chopping and dropping. As I chopped and dropped, my thoughts were constantly drawn to what to plant next to cover the soil, and the answer was staring me in the face the whole time. The one swell where the pumpkins had taken off was covered in vines and massive leaves, so I've had another go at planting pumpkin and melon seedlings. Once pumpkin seedlings get past 3 or 4 leaves of growth, they must become very untasty to predators. Melon, on the other hand, are really difficult to get going, I've found. Hopefully before the summer heat kicks in properly, we'll have huge vines all over the place and plenty of food. A huge part of gardening is observing and trying to connect the dots to form patterns. This is where you are continually learning, as each garden or as even each garden bed has its own microclimate to get to grips with. The patterns from year to year give you the pointers of what to do and when. A potential pattern was staring me in the face the whole time and is blindingly obvious in this photo. When the jacaranda starts to flower, plant pumpkins. As we look at the garden now at the end of December, I'll give you an idea of the time frame of this video. The bare-rooted fruit trees went in at the beginning of August. The mustard was sprouting at the beginning of September. I chopped, dropped and weeded mid-November, and since then we've had almost 200 mil of rain, which means I haven't had to use the irrigation system yet. So to go forward, the pumpkin and melon is my ground cover of choice. I'll keep sowing the green manure, and I've just saved pigeon pea seeds from elsewhere in the garden, which I'll try and get going between the fruit trees. And finally, I'll home in on a successful patch that is a good example of what I'm aspiring to. In this clip there are potatoes, marigolds, mung beans, millets, silver beet, dill, asparagus, sunflower, tomato, nasturtium and a pear and a peach tree, all creating their own little bit of paradise. So now you know what to do. What are you waiting for? Let's grow shopping. I'll leave you with an action shot of one of gardening's most heartwarming sights.